Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
I am this morning literally up with the lark, as they say. It's 5 a.m. Sorry to disappoint you, but Sobriety this morning refused to rise from his comfy bed at that time of the morning, saying, I don't mind about 7:30, but come on, 4:45 to get out. No, thank you very much. And just turned over. So it's just you, me, and well, it's not exactly the sunrise. It's a bit of a cloudy, overcast one, and actually the sun, the light rose while there was still a 4 in front of the time on the clock. But let me get a picture. Is it kind of is it a mist? I don't know. Not really. But I'm at my favourite lake. Sobriety won't be happy because this favourite lake is his favourite lake as well. Right, shutter speed 100th, f4, ISO 1000. Oh, the light is low, and just a reflective picture in the lake of what I call Bird Island, and a little duck floating into shot here. Hello, chap. There we go. Thank you very much. You've added some context. Right, there's my first sketchbook picture of the morning, and yes, I'm walking today by the lake that's right next door to where I live. I've got a very hectic couple of days on, so I thought coming up, so I thought I'd get out nice and early, make my photo walk a day before the publishing date, and make it a really early one as well. Home in time for breakfast. So I have to read this to you. It's an email from Jim Solos, who is one of our wonderful supporters in Canada land. He's a mentor and a tutor in film photography, and he teaches all ages really to either pick up for the first time or rediscover their joy of film photography, the wonder as it is of analog. Taking a picture, then wondering if that click is going to come to anything at all, or starting again with a film camera after all these years, and continually playing the remember not to look at the back of the camera after you've clicked a game. Yes, I'm looking at you. We've all played that game, haven't we? Anyway, he sent me this message right at the head of the week. Neil, I just had to send this to you. A young fellow I've been chatting with is getting into photography, and on my recommendation has started listening to Photography Daily. Well, that's very kind of you. You're like an ambassador for us, Jim. He sent me the most interesting question, though, a couple of moments ago. Hey, Jim, I'm listening to that show, but the guy keeps saying we need to make sure we have our Fillmore cards. Is that a UK brand? I use SanDisk. Now, being as quick as you know I am, I looked at that for quite some time before realising, of course, this is the checklist I run through near the start of the show and just after I thank MPB. I say something along the lines of boots on and laced, check. Spare batteries, check. Film or cards. Film or cards. Film or cards. Oh, Neil. Yes. See, there's the confusion. It's me running 3 words into each other. Lazy pronunciation, my English teacher would have said, then smacked me over the knuckles with a leather-bound first edition of a Midsummer Night's Dream. What I'm trying to say is make sure you have enough film or memory cards on the checklist that I read at the start. Film or cards. Check. Oh, so David Weston, the lad that Jim's talking about. Welcome to the world of photography, first of all. And, I am officially changing the words from today, from this show, just for you, along the lines of memory cards or spare film. Check. Then there'll be no more confusion. I don't want you spending hours on Amazon looking for film or cards that don't exist. But thank you, Jim, for that. That's sorted. Right, today, we're really in a mindfulness place this week, and I'm going to level with you now. This is a show that has a few things that you may not expect from a photography podcast today. And I mean, that could be a good thing, a very good thing, or really just a reason why photography podcasts should stick to more rigid formats and try not to surprise you with too many twists and turns. But like photography, or film photography, since Jim Solos is still playing on my mind here with his friend, this little cast here starts every week as a very plain, I suppose, white piece of photographic paper on which to develop something in the tray of podcast that may or may not come out quite as you expect. And this, I think, is perhaps going to be one of those shows. I have 4 guests chatting about the quiet of photography, the moments that provide positivity despite the challenges of certain conditions, where making pictures helps in terms of recovery or perhaps day-to-day mindful activity. Can you have mindful and activity together? I think you can. We talk about photography's healing ways today. We talk about PTSD and we talk about sobriety. And then one of our patrons, Andy Fisher, shares how he made his 15-minute portrait, which was his contribution to the assignment set by Giles Penfound a few weeks back now in episode 295, a challenge where you connected with your subject, be that inanimate or in this case a living portrait subject, and contemplated mindfully for 15 minutes before taking one single solitary shot. Now, I know you're thinking that sounds easy. Come on, Neil, just sit down, wait 15 minutes and click. No, but this subject is one of only 2 Westerners in this country who practices a particular martial art that's shrouded in this wonderful mystique. And it was a session that turned into a meditational event, and well, you'll be the judge, and you'll hear Andy talk about that later on in the show. And then we have a conversation about sobriety and photography. See, I told you it was a different week. I would like you to meet Rob Wiskin and Chris O'Sullivan, sober for 10 weeks and 22 years respectively, who share just a part of that journey, but then why making pictures is a constant companion and such an important part of their recovery. And in Chris's case, this is a story that has an extraordinary twist. He'd found rock bottom and he went to say goodbye to a friend.
Today on the Photowalk.
While I was talking to her little girl came out. She asked me out the blue if I had any biscuits, and I said no. And she says, well, can you get me some? Now, the shop was closed at this time, so I made a promise that I would bring her some biscuits. And that made me postpone what I was planning by 12 hours.
Without a doubt, the most important promise Chris had probably ever made. Stories of life told by photographers. And today those stories come from Chris O'Sullivan, Rob Wiskin, Andy Fisher, Adam Hansen, and you, yes, you, including Judith McDermott, George O'Mahony, Sue Sayer, John Grindle, Ewan McNeil and Andy Featherston. It's a Vive la Défense kind of photography podcast made from the letters you send in, the thoughts you have, and words from our special inspirational guests. Whatever you photograph with, be it one of those small compact cameras with a sticky outy lens that's making weird noises now when you retract it because you left it laying in the sand on the beach that time, a fancy top-notch new impress your neighbours Leica number, or a smartphone. This isn't a show that leaves you all at sea if you don't know who Joseph Nicephore Niepce is. He made what's considered to be the first photograph, by the way. It's about how we feel when we make pictures, what it does for us and what it does for others. And in that 6.6 billion people on this planet can make a picture with something, there's a lot of us about to walk with on our photo walk today. In the mailbag then, making pictures sans le caméra. Well, you started the French stuff, Neil. Yes, picture making without the camera. What is Cyana Lumen? The beautiful landscape that is the whole of Ireland, although we're only visiting 2 parts. Sound, yes, there's always a little talk about the sound of your pictures. Colourful fishing harbours, trespassing. What, Neil, have you been arguing with Get Off My Land again? Yes, I have. And the Welsh retreat for Frankenstein. Well, sort of. So, shall we walk then? Checklist out. Coffee and Garibaldi's packed. Check. Boots on and laced? Check. Walking trousers or shorts, long socks please for anybody living somewhere where bullet ants walk alongside you? Check. Spare batteries? Check. And here's one for David Weston. Memory cards or spare film? Check. Earbuds in? Check. Lens caps off. Let's walk. I do love this lake. It's 15, well, probably not even 15 minutes walk away from my front door. We're very lucky to have it, and it features in previous podcasts, and we've talked about this lake before. Matt Delinsky comes here, the chap that we recently met on the show, who uses, in terms of, well, while we're talking about PTSD, who uses the wonderful nature walks that are here. And you can hear the bird chorus, can't you? Fantastic. He uses this lake as really his canvas for his photography, his bird photography, that's played a great part in his recovery as he works with those counselling him to get through PTSD. So being here early, though, is a whole well, properly early, is a new experience, really. Usually we're bumping into 1,001 dog owners by now, myself and Barkalot. I do miss him, actually. Barkalot, you'd love this. Honestly, we'll have words later. I'll say, come on. Sometimes an early morning's good for you. Ooh, okay then. But, right, let's get down by the water. Get a picture of the... Oh, sorry, ducks. We were asleep. Shh. It's so still. It's marvellous. Let me get a picture for you. Let's put the letters down over here. It's everywhere's damp. We had an electric storm last night, but it does seem to have cleared the air. Right. Let's get a photograph across the water of the Nature Discovery Centre. Here we go. Shutter speed 100th, f4. There's a little rock, actually, just a small, almost like a steppy stone rock. Oh, let's get that picture quickly as some geese come in to land on the water, which I can put in the bottom right-hand corner of the frame. There's a coot coming into frame from the left, and there's the Nature Discovery Centre. Fantastic. You hear a lot about one particular camera on this show, and that's not because I'm pushing it, though often it does feel like it, and it's not because it's a feature on the other podcast I do for those who have Fujifilm as their not-so-secret lover. No, it's because it packs a punch as both a camera I can use in pro and sketchbooking capacity, so it does. It's small, and I can literally fit it in my coat pocket. And it is the, say it in unison, Fujifilm X100V, which I bought from those incredibly good and helpful people at mpb.com, a company that have so generously shown their faith and support in this project of ours, this photo walk that we make for me, of a morning, making our photographic imprint, whatever we make pictures of. And it's mixed, I can tell you today. And I'm using my X100V. Yes, I am. So thank you, mpb.com. I bought this one from them. They are the people to use on the internet when it comes to buying and selling and trading used camera kit online in the UK and Europe and the US. Thank you for believing in us as a podcast and as photographers who want to, and this is important to me, be a part of the circular economy and sustainability. And thank you too for selling me this X100V, which allows me to make my life's story. mpb.com, it's a safe place to trade and sell, and if you're buying stuff you get a guarantee as well, which is certainly something very important. Other platforms, not all platforms or marketplaces, offer that security. Right, before we start, a hearty thank you to you for sending in some amazing letters of late. And if yours hasn't appeared on the show just yet, don't worry, it will. But the email address to send them into is studio@photographydaily.show. studio@photographydaily.show. And if you're sending your pictures, then 2,000 pixels wide, please. We used to say on the long side, but now it's just wide. 2,000 pixels wide. And thank you in advance, because the images that you send that accompany your walks are just wonderful. They really are. And the stories that we've received this week, well, Neil, get on, read one. Okay. So we're going to start with Judith McDermott. And you'll see the picture we're about to talk about on the show page today, because that's where these go. And Judith. And one for luck. Judith. If ever there were a letter with a picture that underlined what I hope is the overall feeling of today's podcast, it would be yours. And so I'm starting with you on complete purpose. Judith writes, I'm always thinking about what type of photographer I want to be. And I've tried a few different styles, portraits and weddings and families, babies. But since retiring, I taught maths and statistics for 25 years. I find I'm drawn to the abstract and the painterly. If alternative photography count as a type, I could spend a perfect day making wet cyanotypes and cyanolumins. And I've sent a picture of my latest, and letting the sun do the exposing while I take a walk with my camera and try for impressionistic images of nature using intentional camera movement, which we must do a show on one day, or certainly we should have a guest on about it. Or macro. Macro is another one, isn't it? Yes. Close-up photos of the tiniest amazing details that nature has to offer. The wiser I get... Actually, Judith used the word older, but I always prefer the word wiser when we talk about getting older, Judith. The wiser I get, the more I appreciate shows like yours that support us in our search for personal pleasure and joy in our photographic passions. It doesn't matter if my work doesn't get the accolades or the gallery show offering, although that would be very nice. No, more importantly, it brings about a sense of calm and peace when the world around us seems so chaotic and out of balance. So I'm inspired to follow my heart on this, and I'm thinking of a new project of seeing the extra in the ordinary, or something along those lines. I'm so glad I found the community. All the best from Judith. Well, I'm glad you found it too, Judith. I do wonder sometimes, actually no, scratch that, I often wonder, or muse, how people do find this show. It would probably help me to understand that a little more if my other listener wouldn't mind writing to me to tell me how you found it, if you have a mo. Neil, I'm quite busy, you know. I've got reports to write. Lunch to eat, and the afternoon meeting with the head of finance. I'll see what I can do, but I can't promise more than, I don't know, a sentence. Well, do your best. And while I'm about it, I do love that expression, which I think... which I like to think is a photographic one, finding the extraordinary, the extraordinary in the ordinary. It is one of my favourite expressions. I did once try to use it in a wedding meeting, but only to be countered with a very fair question. Neil, are you suggesting my wedding's ordinary? No, not at all. Anyway, Judith, your picture, yes, it's on the show page today, and I just know my other listener right now is saying, because I can hear you, excuse me, Neil, what is a cyanolumin? Yes, a very good question. Well, there's another link on the show page that describes exactly how to make one, but in short, I'll do my best here, and I did snip this homework from Google, miss. A lumen print is essentially a solar photogram. Oh, what? Yes, well, it's a camera-less process, i.e. you don't need a camera, where you work with black and white photographic paper. You put some subject matter on that paper, usually something organic, something like a flower, and then you need the most important element of this, which is the sun, which of course is more readily available in some markets, like Arizona. But you need a flat surface to rest the paper on that we're talking about, and a sheet of glass to go over the flower, and some fixer, and then a packet of Garibaldis and a cuppa or three, while you wait for an hour for the picture you make to come alive and become art. Neil, I'm still a bit confused, and you're absolutely right to be, because I'm the worst teacher for doing anything that involves a technical process like this. So why don't you follow the link on the show page today, and welcome to an afternoon of diving right into the rabbit warren of YouTube land. Judith, I love creativity like this and the process of slowing down, because this programme today is really about that in places, and creating art. And I'm reminded of something that photographer Finn Beals said to us in episode 253 about pace, about stopping to reconnect with your own space, which is essentially what you've been doing here, making your lumen prints.
Sometimes it's tricky in this world where we are bombarded by images via platforms like Instagram, and people are traveling all over the world and flying in jets or, climbing volcanoes, just to get really demoralized and go, okay, well, I haven't had that opportunity, so I can't make work like it. But you can make work wherever you are, and it's just your approach. And sometimes if you are feeling like that, just close that bloody app down and just reconnect with your surroundings, and you'll be amazed at what sort of comes to mind. It's just, there's a sort of like a value in doing nothing and stepping back a little bit. And it's sort of kind of buzzword at the moment, isn't it? Staying in the moment, but reconnecting with your own space rather than sort of like connecting with far off places through your phone. That's
Finn Beals from episode 253. Links to everything you hear today will be on the show page. Go to the website photographydaily.show, which is where you can send your mails, your missives in as well, and your photographs and the walks that you make as well, which are always very, very appreciated. You'll find links on the show page to what we talk about today, pictures from those that have sent in their photographs, and images in Judith's case. You'll find those on today's episode page. Here's a letter from one of the most magical places on earth. If you don't include the toy shop that featured in my childhood, Chappell's, run by Mr. Chappell, obviously. He was a kind of Willy Wonka type character in the eyes of the kids who lived in Hertford anyway. Chappell's. Here's a letter from George O'Mahony. And no, we're not talking about Chappell's. We're talking about Ireland. Fabulous Ireland, beautiful Ireland, romantic Ireland, picturesque Ireland, and I could go on. First of all, says George, thank you for featuring my image in the 365 group. Oh, yes, that amazing picture you made, the coastal picture, fantastic. Yes, do make sure you go to our Community 365 feature and see where people have been in the world. And that's on the website as well. Tab along the top, you'll find it nice and easily. So yes, you were in the 365, the Community 365 feature. I finally got to visit a friend of mine who lives in Kilkenny, Cityland, and is very proud of his home place. I haven't seen him properly over the past 2 years due to you know what. Yeah, don't mention the C word. Ooh. He'd retired from his GP practice a few years before the word that shall not be mentioned struck, and stood up and volunteered almost immediately to help in any single way that he could. His empathy for other people and caring nature are what drew me to him, plus the fact he has a wicked sense of humour. He's been so busy this past 2 years, vaccinating and travelling around to nursing homes and housebound people giving booster jabs. Maybe his sainthood is in the offering. George's words. Maybe they are, George, I don't know. I won't mention his name, as he'd probably be mortified, as I've put him onto your podcast when I was up in Kilkenny land, and he could be listening. But he's also a very talented photographer with an eye for the unusual and abstract, and spending time with him inspires me and brings me joy in equal measure. So we went for a little photo walk around Kilkenny after a lovely lunch at Cake Face. What a great name for a cake shop, Cake Face. See you at Cake Face, or so you will. Anyway, off we headed. The talking sometimes got in the way of the photography, but that seems to be a theme of your show, so maybe that's a good thing. Thanks for the podcast and introducing me to so many fantastic photographers. And here's a few shots from the walk. I hope you enjoy them, from George. George, his links to the or rather his pictures and links to his Instagram will be on the show page today. And George, you ask if I enjoyed them. George, did I enjoy them? Oh, in my fantasy lotto world, where we won a few euros in my dreams, Sir Barkalot and I booked the sea ferry from Fishguard to come and stay with you for a month. We like a full Irish breakfast every sunrise, please, with extra box tea and Waterford Blah. Thank you very much. Actually, another thing in my dreams, and probably more achievable than the lotto, is to do a photography retreat in beautiful Ireland. And I've got a passion for a place called Killarney. The castle and the lake and the mountains and the stop now, Neil, before you go on like you did before. We're sold. Now, I wasn't really sure whether to play this next segment, because usually I play something of inspiration, like the Finn Beals piece just a moment ago, a photographic piece of inspiration, a former guest usually. But I'm going to play you something a bit, well, a tad left field. Though it's proof, I guess, why I record moments of audio alongside my still pictures, which I've done now for years. And we've talked about this, I know, and I've started doing it more often. I'm like a collector of sounds now. The stream and the wind in the trees and the birds. I mean, this morning I stopped just a moment ago and just recorded the sound of the ducks. Just about 5 minutes of them, because you never know when you might want to listen back to ducks, or they could be a great part of a photo story. So yeah, recording audio, and a true story now. I photographed a wedding in Ireland in 2016 in Killarney, and 2 weeks prior to arriving at Kerry Airport, just down the road from this wonderful place on earth. I mean, it is one of those heavenly places. I'd found out from my next door neighbour, who is ace at Ancestry, and was tracing my very difficult birth family tree due to the fact I was adopted at a time in the UK when the paper trail was pretty much burned in the wake of any information you could retrieve. But I found out that my mother was Irish. Now, I know everyone and anyone claims ancestry back to the Emerald Isle. It's I don't blame you. Presidents of many countries dine out on being able to wear a green rugby jersey at certain times of the year, but for me, it was a bolt out of the blue, and nothing I'd been expecting at all for a boy who, well, really for his whole life, thought he was the result of a swinging 60s indulgence at the Watford Ritzy. But it seems my mother, well, she may have lived in Watford at the time of my birth, but she was a fair way from home, 400 miles or so as the crow flies. And we think not far from where I was photographing in Killarney. So it was an absolute coincidence to suddenly find myself there with that information. And what are the chances of that? Now, I say we think, because there are a few trails that are proving a bit tricky to follow, but with my wonderfully romantic imagination, as I arrived in Killarney the day before that wedding in 2016, it just felt like I'd arrived home. Oh, Neil, stop it. No, it did. It really did. I mean, I took a long walk by Muckcross Lake and had more than one or two moments where I wondered if my mum had perhaps walked the same paths. Obviously, my imaginative mind was painting scenes over time. I won't for it, but there's something in the Irish air, so there is something that allows your mind to wander and become beautifully wistful. And then the next day at the wedding, well, the groom stands up to make his speech, and he makes a fabulous address in which, just in a part of it, he recounts a story about a mother's love. It's a humorous story, and in his fabulous Kerry accent, I listened to his tale. And for me, perhaps a little bit tenuous, maybe, I don't know, but all the same, for me, I lost in my own thoughts about a mum from Ireland as well. And this is why I think sound is such a time capsule, that with the still image is so important. And here's that moment I refer to.
You've always wanted the best for me and put me in the right direction. And even when I've gone wrong, you've been there to support me. To give you a testament of how loyal they are to me, I started my first nightclub experience in Abbeyfield. And we got to the door of the nightclub. I was a little underage at the time. We were all very nervous. I got in, we had a fun night. We got a bus home. It was about 10 years later I found out that my mother had followed the bus to Abbeyfield, called the bouncers. I was basically man-marked for the entire evening, unbeknownst to myself. She then followed the bus home and was sound asleep when I got there. Thank you.
Killarney moment. I told you today's show took a few twists and turns. I hope that wasn't too self-indulgent, but it does underline the, I think, one of the reasons I record things. Although, of course, that was for professional endeavours. It's just so special to have sound. And I'm not talking about video, because, of course, it would be easy to say, oh, just record video. Now, there's something about sound. I refer you back to that comment that I made weeks ago now, where we were talking about the radio and the phrase that used to be, radio paints stronger or better pictures. But a few twists and turns, and we're about to take one of those now. Here's a subject we touched on in the Facebook group, that of sobriety, and how, in a way, photography can help in the recovery process for those going sober. Now, in a short feature, it's very hard to cover this subject as a deep dive, but as we say on the show as a strapline, as a mission statement, if you will, stories of life told by photographers. And those photographic stories they're wide and varied. Sometimes they're household names. Joel Meyerowitz, absolute pleasure to have Joel on the show recently, and Joanne MacArthur with that truly potent story about animal photojournalism, and Obama's photographer, Pete Souza, and then I think of the stories about Ukraine that we've covered more recently, and Madison Thorne's really moving story about photographing those shielding during the particularly difficult early COVID days, when protesters on the street were called into open up way ahead of it being entirely safe. One protester, do you remember that protester holding up a sign saying, suggesting to the government, sacrifice the weak? And actually Madison, that's the first mention of Madison today, another one to come. It's been varied. And so this week with my guests, I thought we'd have a week of mindfulness, which can mean so many different things, can't it? It could be the quiet of making landscape pictures. It could be developing or printing in the dark room, or in this case, allowing you to be enveloped by what you view through the tiny eyepiece as you go to make a picture, slowing you down and taking you away from pressing matters for that moment that you take a shallow breath. You take it in to record that moment. You stop and then click. And soothing the weight of anxiety and stress. And, well, these are really sentences that I've borrowed from guests who have talked about the mindfulness of photography. Nobody suggests in and of itself, of course, that photography is a cure for all manner of dis-ease of the mind. But you've heard many talk about it on this show. Ian MacDonald, the Canadian photographer, talking about how it was photography that helped him find his quiet through the PTSD of working as a paramedic. Note to self now. Remember to mention Ian again, because I think we should play a clip from that particular programme. More recently, of course, Niels Armelink's who was talking about living with stage 4 cancer and how cycling and photography as a combo has helped with his mental solace and day-to-day practice. And so today, some stories from members of our community about the meditational process of picture making. It's a week that I've really given over to the more mindful aspects of this thing that we love to do, how photography is part of recovery, or if not that, certainly mental well-being. And we're going to start with sobriety, which of course is in itself really a multi-layered conversation. And this conversation in particular touches on the subject of alcohol and alcoholism. Two Facebook group members, Chris O'Sullivan, sober now for 22 years, and at the time of recording, Rob Wiskin, sober for 10 weeks coming up to. And we talked on a sort of more general scale about their individual backstories, which is a South African and an English one. And then we talked about having photography as an outlet. And not wishing, of course, to make it sound like some sort of evangelized cure, but it's clear to hear their belief of just how important picture making was and is to them. And after the conversation that you're about to hear, I want to share something that we haven't done before, something that I'm trying that, well, it is new, that if the subject interests you, that you may want to hear and even be involved in. But first of all, let me introduce you to Rob Wiskin and initially Chris O'Sullivan. Chris, I'm starting with your story. You reached your low point in 2000.
I'd been drinking most of my young adult life. I started at the age of 15, going out with my dad. I always looked older than what I was, so I was never stopped. And it just went down from there, really, and continued through me adult life until the year 2000. I reached the point where I didn't see any way forward. I didn't see any way out. I'd lost my business. I'd lost a job that I'd taken on. I basically was close to being homeless. And I decided I was going to end it all. I went to say ta-ra to a friend of mine who I'd known for quite a while. And it was while I was talking to her, her little girl came out. She asked me out the blue if I had any biscuits. And I said no. And she says, well, can you get me some? Now, the shop was closed at this time. So I made a promise that I would bring her some biscuits. And that made me postpone what I was planning by 12 hours to when the shops opened up. And true to my word, I went round the following morning with a packet of biscuits for the little girl. On the way back from dropping the biscuits off, I happened to stumble past the Drug and Alcohol Abuse Centre. And I thought, you know what, in for a penny, in for a pound. Let's see what they have to say.
Now I know at this point, reading your story, knowing your story, that you had a lot of tests. A doctor you knew put you on a detox program straight away, followed by time in rehab for 18 weeks, which gave you time to do a lot of personal work on the whys and hows of your situation. But for context, this all happened in South Africa, which has, although correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, a fairly alternative drinking culture to many countries.
There is a big drinking culture in South Africa, and it is part of the lifestyle.
Yeah.
Drinking over there, if you drink heavy, it's normal. So realizing that you're an alcoholic is a bigger step, if that's the right terminology.
Well, the little girl and the biscuits is quite the sliding doors moment, reading between the lines of what you have been planning. But prior to that, was there a moment where you realised things were, if you will, beyond the normal, thinking about what you say about the drinking culture?
For me, that came when it was 4 o'clock in the morning. I woke up, I went for a shower, and I took a bottle of Smirnoff Ice.
Right.
I took a bottle of that into the shower with me to have a drink.
Right.
And it hit me in the head like a shovel. I realised, wait a minute, this has gone way beyond just being a heavy drinker.
Well, it's an incredible story that the little girl asking for a packet of biscuits and what a life change that has meant. 22 years of sobriety. And I read something that you, some words that you wrote to me that you said, honestly, hand on heart, you still get the occasional hangover, but you usually it's the sort of heralds the arrival of the cravings rather than, of course, something that you've now abused.
Yes, and that is a God's gospel truth. That is, I can go months and months and months and not think about alcohol or anything like that, and all of a sudden I'll wake up one morning. It's like a dog has slept in my mouth. I've got a pounding headache. My stomach is all over the place. The classic bad head after the night before, and then I know.
Well, I want to bring in our photographer friend Rob at this point, who's now 10 weeks into your sobriety. And from our conversations, I know it's been a long journey of drinking, becoming more and more of an issue across 2 decades, and some family problems brought this to a head. Chris's moment of changing direction at the crossroads is from that extraordinarily ordinary moment of being asked to buy a packet of biscuits. Do you have something quite like that spelled out the word enough for you, Rob?
Yeah, mine's not, quite like that, but literally just Friday in March, 10 weeks on Friday, I literally just woke up, obviously very, very hungover, and I was brushing my teeth and I was just looking at myself in the mirror, and I just stopped brushing my teeth and I just looked at myself and I just said, enough's enough. I've just had enough, and I think at that moment, it was probably the lowest I'd felt in a very, very long time. It was almost at the point of breaking down sort of thing, and I just sort of looked at myself and I thought, what's the biggest common denominator in this whole thing? It's always the drink. And I just said to myself, never, ever again. And I walked downstairs and I just said, I'm going to quit drinking. I've had it. It's done. I'm never drinking again.
So 2 very different stories in time scale. Chris sober for decades. Rob, you're nearer the start of this process. And I know that you've both kindly agreed to share and talk more about your stories in the private Facebook group, whether that be by open debate or indeed personal DMs. And I'm very grateful for you both for suggesting you'll do that. But in the time that we have here, I know you wanted to talk about your relationship with photography and creativity and what an important thing it has been to have in your life during this. And we've talked before, and we will again, about photography and PTSD and stress and depression. And Chris, you're absolutely sure that making pictures, looking through that eyepiece and slowing the world down has played a strong role in your recovery across the years.
Oh, definitely. The thing is, with fighting an addiction, you tend to substitute your addiction for something else.
Yeah.
Be it photography, cycling, running. You grasp onto something that takes your mind off your problem.
Yeah.
Photography never became a substitute for my addiction. My love of photography as it is now only started about 5-6 years ago. But it has helped immensely because you have to immerse yourself in the image you're trying to take. You forget all about all your stresses, all your worries. You're just concentrating on the light, the composition, or whatever, and you forget all your problems. And it just, even if it's just for 5 minutes, sometimes that's all my brain needs anyway, just to reset and readjust. And then it gives me the strength to then move on for another 12 hours.
I think that's the most magical thing about picture making, that the world literally can stop around you, even in the noise of a big event. For me, looking through the eyepiece takes me into some kind of alternative dimension, if that makes sense, Chris.
Oh, perfect sense to me. It's when I go out with my camera, I'll see something that you wouldn't normally look at.
Yeah.
And then I'll put my tripod up and I'll set my camera up, and like you say, you disappear into your own little universe.
You do. Yeah.
You see things that even another photographer stood right next to you doesn't see. Yeah. If two cameras pointed in the same direction and 2 different photographers end up with 2 different images. It was like riding a motorcycle. You climb onto a motorcycle, and although you have to concentrate 110% just to stay alive on there, your stresses and worries of your day-to-day life disappear while you've got the crash helmet on. And the photography is exactly the same. It's a way of just switching the brain off from day-to-day worries and enjoying the moment.
And Rob, you've in the 10 weeks that we're at here, and congratulations in advance of that day coming up in a few days' time as we're recording this. But what you've gone to do is start a project, a photographic project. That's what you've used to fill your time, isn't it?
Yeah, I wanted to start something with Louth. Like, I'd always sort of had that idea in my head.
Louth being a local town to you?
Yeah, Louth being my town. It's a nice little, quirky town and everything.
Yeah.
And I always sort of thought, it'd be quite a nice little project to start. Well, what I found was when I decided that day to quit alcohol, was the one thing that really changed for me and dramatically sort of overnight was I felt like I had so much more free time.
Yeah.
Like it's like hours upon hours of the day just all of a sudden opened up to me. So I then started going out in the mornings because obviously I was waking up, I was feeling fresh. And I started to walk to work, but a longer way around. And I would take my X100V and I'd just be snapping away and just really enjoying the results. And then what I found was it was sort of doubling up on how I was feeling. So not only was I, freeing up the time and, being able to go out and have a walk, but obviously, like we all know, photography just helps you mentally. It just like makes you feel more at peace. And I was feeling like I was getting more done and, that reward, it was just a positive snowball effect.
That's interesting that you think of it as a reward to get out there.
Yeah, definitely, because of all that free time. I mean, before I was nursing a hangover. All I was thinking of was like, a big fry up or, a bacon sandwich and, walking to work at the last possible minute because, I had a bit of a headache or I was just feeling down. Whereas now it's like, oh, okay, I've got 2.5 hours before I start work because I've woke up nice and early. So now I can go for a nice little stroll.
And not a bad place for a stroll. It's got Photowalk written all over it. Rob, I wonder just finally if you see anything in Chris's story that particularly struck you in terms of your experiences. Now that for the first time you've been able to, and I feel very privy to this. This is the first time you've actually both spoken. You've exchanged messages but not spoken.
No, well, for me personally, I would say that listening to Chris's story, that I felt like I was heading that way quite rapidly towards the end. And I feel, lucky and blessed that I was able to wake up that one morning and just sort of say to myself in the mirror, I have to stop now. Because, it does grab you, doesn't it? And it just quickly just spirals and spirals. And I could have ended up losing my businesses and more.
It's one of those things that it works like a little worm that you don't know is there. You're aware of it, but you don't realize how close it is. And when the tumble happens, it's like going off the edge of a cliff. It's sort of, you're walking down a gentle downhill slope and all of a sudden you just go off the edge of a cliff and then you're at rock bottom. And if you have managed to save yourself going over the edge, that is magnificent. And I wish you all the best in your endeavours to stay sober.
My thanks to Chris O'Sullivan and Rob Wiskin for their honesty and sharing what they have. And as I said, they're Facebook members of the Photography Daily group, which you're welcome to become a part of. It's a group. I think it's a safe place to talk and discuss and share pictures. Please, while I'm about it, while I remember, try to make sure that you leave a paragraph, something about the picture that you're leaving on there, so it doesn't become a Facebook group which is just picture and nothing else. It's nice to get some context. So yes, thank you in advance for doing that. It's very kind of you, very appreciated. Yes, we occasionally dip into that group to tell stories, and that's why I picked Chris and Rob's story. And we haven't done this before, but the conversation between them continued, minus too much from me. And if you'd like to hear that, it's not really an interview, it's more of a chat. I've decided to package it up as a sound film, and I've posted it in the Facebook group. There's the best part of, I'd say, about 10 minutes or more, where they discuss some practical measures in sobriety. Well, that doesn't sound very photographic, Neil, or maybe it's not, but also the group is about support and community. And so if you'd like to hear that, then it's in there. And they have both said that if you'd like to discuss the topic, the subject more, either in public there, in the post, or by direct messaging, then they'd be pleased to chat with you. So back to your letters. A triptych now, to use photographic lingo. We'll start with Sue Sayer. Hello, Neil, it's me again. Oh, it can be you again. It's lovely to hear from you, Sue. I've recently been on holiday to Cornwall, you lucky thing. My photography plans went out of the window, really, as I was with my daughter and family. Grandchildren can be very demanding of time when the business of crabbing on the quayside is going on. Did you know that crabbing, she says, has moved on from a line and weight? Has it? Don't say it's gone all virtual. You just do it by an app now, Sue. It's now done with a drop net, which is actually much better, as there's no risk of the crab dropping off just as you're about to land it. So the competition of who can catch the most really heats up. This is intensified when neighbouring crabbers ask how many you've caught. All great fun, and of course all crabs return safely to the harbour, unharmed. Yeah, I do. We don't. Our kids now are older, 12 and 14. So, coming up to 12, nearly 12, practically 12, days away from being 12. So we don't really, these days, if we were to suggest crabbing, I think certainly Jack, our eldest, would say, "What? Really? No, let's just go and eat burgers." But yeah, I did. That was one thing I really enjoyed on holiday with the boys, going crabbing. But you're right, it does get a bit competitive. I remember quite some time back doing it, and the next door person to us had their bucket kicked over by a competitive what's-it that was next door to them. How many have you got? 5? I've only got 4. Oh, sorry, my foot slipped. Anyway, while all this is going on, says Sue, I managed to get permission to go for a wander around Mevagissey Harbour. Now, note to self again, try to remember to put up a link for Mevagissey. Easier to think than say, because it is a beautiful, beautiful place in the world. It's quite steep, isn't it, as you get down to the harbour? And Sue says, I concentrated on reflections of the boats and the surrounding quaint old buildings, attached a medley of some of my shots. Sue, I love it's a medley of colour, isn't it? And I've popped those on the show page today. Right, next up, second one in the triptych, photo essays. Now, I have been a little slow to upload some of these of late on the website. My humble apologies. There are a few to do, so if one of those is yours, give me a long, hard Paddington Bear stare now. Go on. Well, I can feel it. But yes, I promise they'll be up soon. And I went for one at the start of the week. I uploaded one from John Grindle called Abstract Pictures of the River Frome, which I know you'll love. His pictures, John, they're superb. I know you'll enjoy them as I did. Just one sentence from the piece, just to whet your appetite, and I'll let you go and read and see the rest. On January the 1st, says John, I woke to an amazing hoar frost and sunrise. I was soon snapping away. The photos I made that morning were not abstract in the Sam Gregory style, but more of an intimate landscape style. My project mission statement took a turn into one of an intimate landscape project. Who is Sam Gregory? What do flowers look like in an intimate landscape style? All will be revealed. Just go to the photo essays page. You'll see the tab at the top. And I got a quick DM from John after popping up the feature and writing to him to tell him, and he said, I listened to your latest podcast driving up to Worcester on Saturday. How about taking a selfie when you're on your photo walk, showing all the kit and so on you have when you're making these little treasures? Cheers, John. Noted, John, noted. And I shall start to do that. I should try and do something a little bit arty. My thinking cap is on. As for a selfie, though, I've not yet caught the influencer bug. So maybe a picture of Sabaka will have to suffice. On a lead, because he's going through his adolescent period early and chasing anything that looks like it's going to move. Hang on, there's a train coming. Yes, the lake, the walk that I take here is dissected between the canal part, which we often walk along, and the lakeside by a reasonably busy railway line, the Great Western Route, the famous Great Western Route. So yeah, I will make those pictures, John. Some behind the scenes for you. And then third in the triptych. Are we safe to cross? That was one train, but they come thick and fast. Yeah, we're okay. Third in the triptych. Hello, Neil. This is from Ewan McNeil. After Friday's podcast, and in particular today's More episode, I have to encourage you to read a couple of books by an author called Nick Hayes, The Book of Trespass and The Trespasser's Companion. I'm sure you'll find them fascinating, and they'll give you a more nuanced position from which to respond to the next temporary custodian of a geographical boundary who comes to converse with you. They're also available as audiobooks, he says, so you can listen in car to save time. Now, if you're not a patron, you'll be wondering what on earth I'm talking about there. Hello, who, what, where, when? Well, on the More show last weekend, and after the Photowalk show, which Ewan is referring to, that's last week's Photowalk show, I got stopped proper by Get Off My Land, who tore a proper strip off me. So he did for trespassing. I thought, hang on a moment, that makes me sound very illegal. And I'm not intending to be very illegal. I mean, I'm generally a proper rule follower. When I park in the bays where I'm told to, and when there's a sign that says don't enter, well, although that's changed a bit of late, hasn't it? Yes, Neil, I was just about to remind you. You've been perhaps walking over the threshold in a few places that maybe you shouldn't. But I am getting a bit agitated by this right to roam thing, and I appreciate this is an English thing now, because there are plenty of countries, Scandic countries that we talk about, and of course Scotland, now that we know that there's a fantastic right to roam principle in place there. But I was looking a bit more into this, and I was reading a few thoughts from Nick Hayes, who would make actually a fantastic guest. We have access in England to, wait for it, 8% of countryside. 8%. The rest is owned and overseen by Get Off My Land, who clearly talks a good battle, as you found out in last week's More. But after a lot more reading, it's maybe not telling the entire truth, it would seem, about why you can't be immersed in nature. And I knew the moment I saw him last week, and it was literally just as I'd recorded the last couple of thoughts on the photo walk. I knew that as he was approaching, I was in trouble, despite the fact there were no signs. And I thought, well, this is a huge expanse of land stretching off forever, with nice sort of grass to walk on at the side of the field. But he was very territorial. He got straight down to telling me what he owned, so he did. See that field over there? Yep, mine, that's mine. That road, not public, that's mine. All these fields, as far as you can see, mine. Every single one. That over there, that's mine. That stile, that's mine. That tree, that woodland, mine. Fishing, mine. All mine. See that? And see that cottage right in the distance over there, the white one. See that one? That one. That one over there. What? I can't see it. No, that one. You're not looking the right way. Look that way. Yeah, oh, I think I can see it. That one. Is that yours as well? No, I don't own that one. Oh. Who owns that one? Oh, that's Farmer Nigel, that is. All right. Don't go on his land. Don't be going on his land. No, get off his land. Get off my land. Get off his land. He's got a collie dog with a red eye. Oh, very vicious. Get off my land. Get off his land. Get off the collie dog's land. He'll have you. Got a red eye, he has. Has he? What's he called? Blue. Anyway, I've invited Nick onto the show. No word back yet. But I'm hoping, and whilst I know that you may be in the States, or Scotland, or Norway, or any other manner of places that have a much more progressive thought, and I'm just, isn't that ironic? I'm just walking past the big "Thou shalt not enter" sign by a fishery here. See, why? Go that way, and it's just, it's nothing to do with wild meadows. That's everything to do with get off my land, it's my fish. Don't go anywhere near them. Don't even look at them. Don't look at my fish. But I think Nick would make a very interesting guest because it's not just about right to roam. It's also about the beauty of nature. And so yes, I've written to him. No word back yet, but here's hoping. Today I'm staying on the right side of the law. I'm not going in anywhere I shouldn't. So I don't want to be told off again quite like I was last week. That made me right miserable for at least half an hour. Oh. You're very noisy. Lots to say. Oh, hang on, snail crossing. Let's see if I can... Oh, come on, Neil, it's just a picture of a snail on a path. I know, but it's my something and nothing. A sketchbook image. Hello, Mr. Snail. Hello. You all right? Yeah, just crossing. Glad you saw me. I did, yeah. You need to be wearing some neon. All right. It's funny, he's just sort of reared up at me. It's okay? Yeah, it's all right. You carry on. Shall I? I feel like I should move you, but that's interfering with nature, isn't it? I'm glad Sir Barkalot isn't here. You would have been thinking, right, what's for breakfast? Oh, look at that, snail. Don't mind if I do. Like many independent podcasters around this wonderful planet of ours, we have a Patreon page for this podcast and our Photowalk that we make each week, where some very special friends help support this show for the price of a cup of high street coffee or a roll of my favourite film. Which one is that? HP5, yes it is. Black and white film a month. And our patrons help support the time that it takes to make and sustain these shows, which now take, roughly about 3 production days a week, along with time on the website with all the show notes and the community features and the Instagram and the Facebook stories. And all right, Neil, we know you work hard. Don't labour it. And to say thank you, I make an additional short diary-styled show each week, which you can only hear on the Patreon webpage or the wonderful app on your smartphone called More, a little oasis of extra features. Plus, we meet each month on Zoom right at the start of the month, and we share our stories and pictures. And now during the week as well, we have the replay show where you get to hear the interviews unplugged, if you will. Let's get through the gate. I got a very funny look just a moment ago. I was taking that picture of the snail, and I walked a few steps on, and through the fence I could see fishermen. Get off my land, fisherman. He was giving me a very funny look. You seem to be talking to yourself. Yes, it's a podcast. Oh, you don't understand. Get off my land. Come on, away you go. Don't be talking now. You're interrupting my peace. I've no idea, by the way, why I get off my land, and everybody associated with that now, including the fishermen, all sound like they're Cornish pirates. It's just going to have to be a character sound. Where were we? Anyway, yes, patrons. So to thank you, yes, we have the More show, we have the replay show, which is where you get to hear the interviews unplugged. And my next guest is one of our fabulous patrons, who always makes great contributions in the monthly Zoom as well. Andy Fisher, who is a fantastic photographer. He's a teacher by trade, but a fine photographer. He's a great mentor, which probably explains why he's such a joy when it comes to telling stories and the following story. Now, a few weeks back, as I mentioned earlier on in today's Photowalk, we had an assignment set by my very good friend, Giles Penfound, the documentary photographer, who we mention reasonably often. And the assignment was all about taking your time, slowing right down. That seems very appropriate and apposite to mention today, of course, because this is a show. It's a very meditational show in context of the guests and what we're talking about. And Giles set this fantastic assignment, which was all about immersing yourself in... oh, look, that tree's fallen across the river. This storm that we had last night, honestly, it's brought down a tree across the canal. I'll get a picture of that. Neil, you were halfway through telling us about the 15-minute assignment. I know, but let me just get a picture. Park that thought for a second. All right. 100th shutter speed, no snails. F5.6. There we go. It's still quite sort of a overcast collection of shots. There's no nice sort of contrasty sunrise, unfortunately, but right, yes, 15 minutes. Come on, Neil, stay with it. Yes, 15 minutes. So it's about immersing yourself in a picture, about being present, just walking around the subject, whatever that subject may be, alive or otherwise, sort of looking at it and not making that image for 15 minutes, which seems a sort of, it seems perhaps an alien concept for many people, including myself, many photographers that walk out with a camera and think, right, sketchbook, boom, that, see something over there like the tree across the river, boom, got that. And it was an assignment that wasn't at all about that style of photography. So that was the 15-minute challenge. And Andy Fisher took on that 15-minute challenge, but he decided to make that challenge part of a portrait shoot, which of course, when you ask somebody to just stop, as he did for his subject, as you'll find out as he explains, I suppose in some respects that could feel quite awkward. But I don't think, and you'll hear, that it was that kind of experience at all. Here's Andy Fisher with a portrait sitter who entirely understands the benefit of space and thought and quiet.
Andy, this is a conversation about one shoot. And actually, it started out as really the picture that I'm talking about started out as a reply to the 15-minute challenge that was set by Giles Penfound in the assignment.
Yeah.
I want you to take me through. First of all, I'd like to know who Dan is, because Dan is the subject in this. And that's a very important who Dan is and what Dan does, because that plays into how the assignment worked between you, because you're both into martial arts. And I think that helped a lot in this scenario. So take me through who Dan is, first of all. Who's your subject?
Okay, yeah. So Dan Edwards is a good friend of mine. I've known him since he was 10. I went to school with his older brother. We gelled over a shared passion for the martial arts, which we both studied since we were young kids. Yeah. And we've stayed in touch all of that time since. So Dan, he's a fascinating guy. He was England champion for his style of martial arts before he was 16. He was a very bright guy, and he went to university in Cambridge to study Japanese and history with the sole intention of then going out to Japan and study some of the traditional martial arts that were unavailable in the UK in Japan. So he wanted to master the Japanese language so that he had some credibility when he went as a Westerner before these literally kind of modern samurai.
That's effectively movie-like, isn't it? That you should go to learn Japanese because you know that you're going to put this into practice when you need it for the martial arts.
Absolutely. I mean, we grew up watching the Van Damme movies and all those kind of things. And I think we didn't make a distinction between real life and films. It's just So he traveled out to Japan and he committed to studying a style of swordsmanship called Katori Shinto Ryu. And it's a very rare form now. It's one of the few forms of martial arts that have an unbroken lineage from the samurai era, and they haven't changed the way they train. Many modern martial arts adapt what they've been doing for a modern audience. So Taekwondo, for example, you can score points by hitting certain body parts. No one tends to leave those competitions in body bags. Same with karate, for example. The style of martial art that I studied involves being in a very low stance. It's not actually a natural stance to fight from. And when you look into the history of it, it's because the Japanese instructors, when they took their first wave of Westerners, didn't like the fact that these Westerners were towering over them. Right. So they got the Westerners to drop their stance until they were eye to eye. Right. And that hand-me-down stance is what we've done ever since. There are elements of traditional martial arts that have been lost along the way as it's come into Western culture. Yeah. Katori Shinto Ryu, it's not. They still train with live blades, sharpened, some of them sharpest blades in the world.
So these are the blades that can take your head off quite easily.
Yeah. Or a finger off if you sheath it badly. There's no room for error.
No.
And that's what attracted Dan to it. So he had to sign a blood oath, which is when you cut yourself and sign your name in blood on a scroll that has all of the students going back the centuries since this martial arts practice began.
Yeah.
And he's one of very few Westerners to have studied.
Well, that was going to be my question. I wonder how many Westerners have done that form of martial arts, and you've already answered that one. And
not many.
And I dare say he wouldn't have been allowed to do it had he not known the language.
No, he wouldn't have got in the front door. No. And even when he did, I think there was a period of months where he was entrusted with mopping the floor and serving tea and not much else. It was really old style training. Yeah. But he stayed out there and he studied for 5 years and he developed a degree of competency, came back to the UK, found one other Westerner in the UK who had also studied that sword art, and he's maintained a practice at least once a week ever since. And he's now the CEO of a company called Parkour Generations, where he's instructing people on movement practice. Right. And most of the people who train with him don't know this background, this story. He's not somebody who likes plaudits or performance.
He doesn't shout about the black belt.
No, most people don't know anything about that side of his life.
No.
And it's a personal practice and a life, a way of life, a philosophy for him. And as I say, like if you mess up on the drawing of the blade or the resheathing it, you can find a finger on the floor.
Really?
It requires absolute presence. And I think that's a carryover into his parkour practice now, which similar, if you aren't fully focused when you're about to perform a jump from one platform to another, you can get badly injured. Yeah. So that same mental focus is there in both disciplines.
What an incredible character. So let's talk about the portrait. Never mind the 15 minutes part of it just yet, but how do you begin to tell a story about somebody like that? Because it's very easy just to photograph him with the sword. But of course, you want to say so much more than that in a portrait, don't you?
Yes, and the premise for the image was that I just finally managed to get my hands on a medium format camera. And so Dan was a willing guinea pig for me to to test not only the GFX 50S, which I picked up with the 80mm lens. So it was a chance to do that with a subject who wasn't going to get frustrated if I made a mess of things. But also I just started teaching myself flash photography. And so I bought the AD200s with me and a couple of modifiers. Right. And I wanted to find a way of capturing the essence of Dan as a martial arts practitioner, but also to include his sword in the image, but not have the sword dominate. So we were trying different lighting patterns, and I just bought a very plain backdrop and worked with putting a snoot on the blade and then a soft modifier with Rembrandt lighting on Dan, and then just saw what we came up with, really.
So the background was darker. You wanted this to be a lower key piece of work, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's getting that balance. I wanted it to be dramatic, but I didn't want it to be ostentatious or self-indulgent. It had to be, because much of in Japan there's a precept or concept called wabi-sabi, which means that it's similar. It shows up in things like bonsai as well, where there is beauty in the simplicity. So there's not bells and whistles and self-gratifying aesthetic. It's pared down to the essence. Yeah. And so I wanted everything to be simple, to be muted color tones, but still to capture the kind of strength of his character.
I would imagine this was quite a quiet session. It was quite a contemplative session, a thoughtful session.
Yeah, we had some music, some instrumental music playing in the background.
Yeah.
But yeah, that segues quite nicely to what we did before, which was this the assignment, the 15-minute assignment, which had been set, and I was trying to figure out a way in which I was going to incorporate that into my work, because I predominantly work with portrait. So for the listeners might remember that the task was to sit for at least 15 minutes before you take a photograph of whatever your subject might be.
Yeah. To sort of drink the scene in, as it were.
Yeah, and maybe sort of to drop into a different relationship with the thing that you're photographing, rather than trying to capture the surface level or the first angle that you might compose. And it only really, I didn't plan on doing this, but it came to me as I was setting things up. Where Dan lives in Wimbledon Village, there's some lovely light coming through his window at the time of day I was setting up, and he was just waiting for me patiently and looking out the window, and the light was falling on him in just such a way that I thought that would be a really nice portrait, just as he is with his t-shirt on looking out the window. So I proposed that we sit to still ourselves for the photograph session to come, and just as an exercise in mindfulness, just to sit for 15 minutes, and that I would take a photograph after that time, but not before. And it kind of evolved from there, really. I then thought, well, I don't want him to break the mood by me saying, right, I'm just going to press the button now. So I set up a remote trigger. I got it composed and everything. I got Dan sitting to look out the window, and we agreed to then not talk for 15 minutes, for him to stay roughly in the same place, but let his thoughts take him wherever they might. And we sat there for 15 minutes in silence.
How did that feel?
It was great. I mean, we're so busy that to actually take 15 minutes out and be still is rather lovely.
Now, I've seen the photograph, and perhaps, I mean, I've got a wild imagination, but I can just, because I knew the story, for me, I'm seeing him thinking of all sorts of things. I mean, I've effectively put him in a martial arts movie. And you can see this because we're going to show this on the show page. You can see, you'll see that. But he does look very pensive, doesn't he? There's an incredible intensity to that portrait, I think. Do you think that's the most intense of all the pictures that you took that day?
Oh, that's a really good question. If you look at the gaze on some of the images with the sword, there's much more, his expression's more severe, I think. But intensity is a really good qualifier. I think there's probably more intensity in the close-up portrait. I'd agree, yeah. And I made a point of not asking him what he was thinking when I took the shot. So I set an alarm on my watch so that I wasn't peeping to see what time it was, so I could also drop into that experience. I was watching the light changing on his face and just watching him and trying to just be still. And then my watch had a haptic vibration that's very kind of quiet. And when that vibrated, I pressed.
You pressed.
And knowing that there was one shot, I wasn't going to do it again. If I didn't get focus, or if it wasn't a good image, then it was a good exercise. It was just a practice, and I had no idea the quality of what would come out. I like a portrait to still, I mean, you talked about, I wonder what was going on in there. There's a lot going on between the eyes, and I don't want to diminish it. He might have said, I was thinking about dinner, and that would diminish it.
It would,
or in revealing what it was that he was thinking about, it would somehow lessen the image for me. I like the fact that I don't know, and that there's something of him that he gets to keep for himself in that image. I got to take the image, the thoughts are his.
Now, you're sort of fairly new-ish to portrait making, aren't you?
Yeah, I kind of dabbled. My degree in part was photography, but I've come back after a long hiatus and learning digital. And I did some street photography for a while before lockdown, a few years before, but I found that all I was doing actually was just bumping into strangers and asking if I could take headshots of them, really. There were very few street images in my street portraiture. So now I'm starting to do more semi-professional work. I'm starting to get some paid work, and it remains a kind of passion, a pleasure as well.
It's a superb picture. Will you do another 15-minute portrait, or is that the experience that you think?
Well,
I've done one. That's it. I've done it.
I think I was very lucky to have him as my subject. I'm not sure how comfortable many other people would be with the process. whether they'd get something from it. I saw that there was a performance artist a while back that their performance was to sit in a chair opposite somebody else and just make eye contact in silence. And it caused all kinds of strong reactions with people welling up with tears, feeling that they'd been seen authentically for the first time, you know. But I think there was something about the fact that I know Dan well. I felt comfortable having his permission to do that it wasn't awkward. It didn't feel exploitative.
No.
I wonder whether maybe it is what it was and I should let it be rather than try and replicate it. I'm not sure.
And my thanks to Andy Fisher for his time talking us through that 15-minute portrait. And of course, more about his incredible subject, of which I'll leave a link to the parkour that he was talking about on the show page today. 365, yes, we are still doing our Community 365. We've got about, what was the last number? I quite forget. What was it? We've got about 100 to run. We didn't start on the 1st of January, so it stops at a time of the year you're not perhaps expecting it to stop. And there's a part of me thinking, should we just continue with it? Or should we think of something new? I don't know. What do you think? You tell me. But anyway, the Community 365 is it's your opportunity to join in with a 365 where you make a picture every single day usually, don't you? But not for our one. You don't have that stress. You can make one every now and then, send it in, and we share it on the Community 365 page. You'll find a tab at the top of the website, Neil. Yes, at the top of the website. How did you know? Well, you've said it a few times. Okay, but if you are sending them in, please, 2,000 pixels on the wide side. You don't have to in this case, but if you can tell me a little bit about what the photograph is of or where it was made, because I like that geographical element of it where we get to see where you are in the world. Yes, then please include that as well. Email address to send these 365s into, and your letters, of course, for the show as well, is, as always, hasn't changed, studio@photographydaily.show. Studio@photographydaily.show. You can also go via the contact page where there's a few questions on there that might get you thinking about what you could write in about, just in case you thought, I'd like to write into the show, but I'm not quite sure what to share. On the contact page, there's some questions. A letter from Andy Featherstone. Hello, Neil. I attach a few observations in light from a recent trip to Wales, which led me to an interesting little stone building hidden in a far corner of the grounds of Palais Hall, which is a hotel and restaurant, a grand old dame of a house, erected in 1870 and widely recognised as one of Wales' most important buildings. Mrs. F and I were enjoying a bit of an indulgent long weekend to belatedly celebrate my big Hawaii birthday last year. Hawaii birthday? Yes, 5-0, we get it. And had sampled dinner in a sumptuous room the night before. At breakfast, my attention was grabbed by a dashboard of gauges and levers or levers and switches mounted on the wall in a corridor outside the dining room. Antique brass plates labelled the gauges amperes and volts, and the ceramic fuses in the large fuse box were about as big as your fist and labelled by room. It had this sort of on-off lever that you can imagine Dr. Frankenstein pulling when he brought his monster to life. My word, what sort of place were you staying in? Come down here, sir. Just need to prepare you for the day. Sit in that seat, would you? Well, this one, yeah, put those straps on. Oh, is that all part of breakfast? Yes, it is, sir. Stay still. Noticing my interest, their head of maintenance asked me if I'd like to discover more. I think at this point, I might have been running in the opposite direction, Adam. So on went the walking boots, and off across the estate we strode on an early morning yomp. It turns out that eco-schemes are not really a new thing. In 1919, a very forward-looking owner of this fine house took advantage of the position of the house in relation to water supplies and gravity, i.e. blooming Big Hill and a flooded quarry, and installed a hydroelectric scheme. Back in the day, the old, I think this is Gilks, isn't it? Gilks or is it Gilks? turbine provided enough energy to power the household, but it produced electricity of the DC type, direct current. And so when the most recent owners took up residence in 2015, it was deemed to be the wrong sort of electricity. My word, was it only 2015 when that was changed? Crikey, how did, was it a hotel before that? Anyway, yes, it was deemed to be the wrong sort of electricity and neither safe nor of any use to feed into the national grid. However, as a Grade 2 listed building, it needed to be preserved. The present owners have cleverly adapted the pipework to feed a more modern turbine generating ample AC power, which not only provides enough juice to run the hotel, but also to provide free EV charging for guests and for the public, as well as feeding a significant amount of excess energy into the grid. Goodness, you certainly learned a lot about the place, didn't you? However, I was privileged to get a private tour of the old turbine and generator house, where the old equipment lies dormant. The original gauges now rest at zero, and the ancient tubes of grease and oversized spanners and wrenches, well, they all sit gathering dust and cobwebs. This place, photographically, has a wonderful atmosphere. The whiff of oil and grease and electric charge, the opaque windows softening the light, the pale green walls losing their paint and the heavy machinery of yesteryear, the absolute cutting edge of new technology at the time. It was riveted and bolted and hammered and forged by men in the industrial north, but now sleeping in retirement. I wonder perhaps whether the old big turbine generator was looking through one squinted eye. See, you've got that imagination too. One squinted eye at the more compact, lightweight, modern Italian turbine installed just next door and thinking, you're far more efficient and safe, and yet 100 years later, not really doing anything that I couldn't do back in my day. All the best from Adam. I think I did that in the wrong... Yeah, that should have been a different voice, shouldn't it, for the turbine? Oh, we'll go with it. Pictures are on the show page today, and I love the story and your thoughts. The show page is very busy today. Busy in a good way, that is. Lots and lots to see and drink in. And thank you, Adam. They are fantastic pictures, and I think I do get a feeling of the way you felt when you were making those pictures, looking at those that you sent in. Right, some inspiration. I want to play a clip that I've played this before actually from one of our guests, Ian MacDonald, former paramedic in Canada. For a while though, he was a Fujifilm ambassador. He's a photographer, somebody who knows about PTSD and photography because of his experiences as a paramedic for many years. So this is, I suppose, this is the kind of intro to the final feature today. Here's Ian talking about mindfulness.
One of the things for me that really changed after I went through my PTSD and all of the counseling that helped me through it was a recognition of the importance of mindfulness and the importance of really being in the moment. And that's a catchphrase. It's a buzzword that we use nowadays. But the reality is, if I look back on my life, I don't know if I was always truly in the moment. It's hard to be present. And I think we've all had the experiences where maybe we're watching TV and answering emails and trying to be attentive to our family at the same time, and it doesn't work. And I think that creates an internal point of anxiety. And when I went through my counseling, we spent a lot of time on that, on the importance of being mindful and living in the moment and really just experiencing what's happening around you. And photography, much like playing guitar or any other form of art, really complements that because it's a task where you can be just focused. You've got a composition in front of you, you've got a moment in front of you, and you really can just take the time to create the best image that you see in your mind. And everything else, all of the noise, all of the day-to-day clutter, it just isn't in your mind at that time. And I think that's really where photography helped me in a great way through the PTSD.
Did you hear that? It's across the river, so it may not come out so well. It's a cuckoo. Where are you? I've got the wrong kind of camera entirely, if I do see you, because I've got my Fujifilm X100V. Brilliant that it is, from mpb.com, thank you very much. Which I did buy with my own money, by the way, but not very good at... There we go, he's doing it again. Or she. Look, the swan's just across the way there. They're sort of looking the way I am now. Where is it? Oh, I can't see it either. Have you seen it? No, I'm looking for it. Oh, it's on the left. Anyway, my thanks to Ian MacDonald for his time and his thoughts about mindfulness and the connection with photography. So to my final guest, 4 guests today, all with their own individual stories. I hope you've enjoyed this. Next week, you and I are going underwater with one guest. More of that in a moment. Now, PTSD. Well, it's something that we've talked about on the program before, as you've just heard, and again, following the mission statement that we have, or strapline, stories of life told by photographers. Here is a friend of ours in the community called Adam Hansen, who has a connection to the show through a guest from a few months back, Madison Thorne. Now, Madison introduced me to Adam, who she's been mentoring from afar. Though that's the way of the world and Zoom, isn't it? But in a mindfulness week, it seems very appropriate to be featuring Adam, who has his own story to share.
Adam, PTSD is something that's often considered the legacy of being in a theatre of war or some kind of conflict, certainly a result of man's ability to create chaos. But equally, and in your case, it's a very real condition brought on by a myriad of alternative scenarios of trauma, and it starts early for you, aged 13. Do you mind sharing why?
Yeah, it was the first experience with death for me. It sounds almost ridiculous looking back on it. A friend of mine, a tractor ran him over. And I found out in summer school, and the teacher had found out before me. And he asked if anybody knew Nate. And I was the only one that raised my hand. All he said was, he's dead. And I'm like, oh. And then we moved on with the class.
And it seems like this grief or grief disorder, as I've read it's called, has manifested in PTSD, compounded by the loss of more friends and family through these years.
That was kind of the starting point of almost every year since. So that was 1998. Average about 1 a year, sometimes as high as 3 friends pass away.
I know PTSD has been formally diagnosed now. Are you receiving counseling?
I've only recently started going to therapy just because I noticed I'm pulling back from people a little more, anxiety around crowds, wanting to get to know people. I'm very social for the most part, but I realized that was falling away quickly. I was avoiding people more often. Big crowds, I just couldn't be around them. I realized that there was a big change in myself, especially the last few years with COVID and all that stuff, that I needed to seek out help.
Well, rewinding back to the 90s, though, initially, you found a solace in art at school. Though actually it was the photography department, because I think you're much like me, that you said the letter that we exchanged was all about how our stick men drawings were not particularly good. Your photography, fortunately, rescued that, though.
It did. I found solace in, I think it was my sophomore year of high school, where they offered a photography class.
I'd like to bring the story up to the last couple of years, if I may, because the photography both started and stopped at school, I know, and the camera sort of went back into a bag, as it were. Though your struggles, of course, with PTSD, they continued into your adult life, and a life move brings you to Colorado, which is where you are now, Adam, with hopes to start a new life. But within months of moving, the very unwelcome pandemic changed your plans completely, didn't it?
I had moved out here, started running a store. I was a store manager at the time. about 6 months in, we closed the store, went on lockdown, and immediately found myself without a job. And searching for a job in the pandemic is never fun.
And so the camera bag makes its appearance again, figuratively. I wonder if you knew then that it was going to become very important to you once more.
It was definitely important because for me, I was in a 600 square foot apartment with a giant dog. So there's not much room to move around. No. It was just myself. Hardly had any friends. And even then, even if I did have more friends, I didn't want to have any chance of getting COVID or anything like that. So the CDC did say, they're like, you can go for your walks. And so I'm like, oh, I got to walk the dog anyway. Might as well bring a camera with me. And so we started off doing 4-mile walks. And then that went into 7, which went into 12, which went into 33 miles.
Well,
it just kept getting further and further the longer we were in lockdown. And I started seeing the weight fall off. I started seeing a change in myself where I felt better about myself. I definitely felt photography was an outlet for me at that point. I kind of found that when in doubt, just carry a camera and kind of show what I'm seeing on a daily basis. Because there is a gorgeous trail about 4 blocks from me that I can go all the way into downtown Denver. So I figured let's explore that trail as much as possible and take pictures along the way. And some days I would get 3 pictures. Some days I would get 200.
There are many stories around the protests in America, the George Floyd story, and it was a protest that was a catalyst for you really starting to believe in your photography and your ability, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And that, of course, happened during lockdown.
Yeah. I had a job for a second at a motorcycle dealership, and it ended up being, I was actually going to start doing pictures of the bikes for them whenever they were putting them up on their website. So I carry a camera around with me anyway.
Yeah.
And it was very early mornings and into late nights. I would be on the train. I think it was about a 2-hour commute each way. There was a day where I had been off my phone all day. And it was the day that George Floyd was killed. And as I'm getting on the train, the security guard goes, "Hey, man, just a heads up. There's some things going on downtown." I'm like, I jump off this train beforehand. And it was such a long day that I fell asleep on the train and missed my stop. And I woke up to the train stopping and them telling everybody off. I think I'm about 10 miles away from my apartment. All public transportation had been shut down. So I'm like, all right, I guess I'm going to walk. Ended up walking right into the George Floyd protests at the Capitol. Yeah. And so I had my camera, so why not start taking pictures? You saw everybody from families to 20-somethings to 50-year-olds, everybody in between was in this crowd. And I saw the police. I saw the way they were standing. You could see the nerves in the faces of the police officers. So I'm running around taking pictures, and the next thing you start seeing gas masks on the police officers.
Yeah.
And I started backing away a little bit, but before I could back away too much, they threw tear gas out. And next thing I felt was 2 hits on my back. I was wearing my backpack, thankfully, but it was pepper balls that they were shooting, and they were shooting me in the back, which just made me mad at that point. So I was able to tell people the best way to kind of help to organize people that were affected by the tear gas and the pepper balls and all that, and make sure that they could have milk and magnesia poured on their eyes and all of that stuff. Everybody had water. And so I couldn't go to sleep that night. So I just stayed up all night editing.
And what did you find within your pictures that gave you that self-belief?
I found that I could catch the emotions from both sides in those pictures that I was able to get. The composition, even in a hectic situation like that, was pretty good. I'd maybe taken 300 pictures in that short time, and majority of them came out. The outpouring of support that I saw from friends, family. Everybody's asking me, can you make this public? Can I share this? And it was one of those things of, oh, I'm actually decent at this. Okay. It was definitely an eye-opening experience in every sense of the word in so many different ways.
I wonder, and perhaps it's not a fair question, but having read your story, talked with you about mental health, and now able to share your story here, I wonder, Adam, what's been the most healing thing in this process over the last couple of years? Walking the trails and the mountains, being with your dog, being a photographer, making pictures of moments like the protest where others could see the value in your work. Is there one thing that's more important than another here?
I think it's a healthy mix of being able to get my creative ideas out, along with actually being outside, even if it's not with a bunch of people, just being outside in general and not locked into my little bubble that is my apartment. The photography is the thing that gets me out. No matter how bad I'm feeling that day, I'm like, I need to go for a walk. Let me make sure the batteries are good and throw the backpack on and let's go.
I've tried to explain what it feels like when you're making pictures, that you can feel your blood pressure lower. You take a gentle breath in, then you literally stop until you press the button, and then you get this gentle release. Well, it's without sounding too woo-woo about it, I feel it's like a meditation all of its own making, and I wonder what that moment feels like to you, making pictures, being at one with where you are.
For me, looking through the viewfinder and trying to find the right shot, it's just me and the camera. Nothing else exists.
Yeah.
Nothing else matters in that moment. It's just, can I get this shot? Can I do this vista justice? Especially when I'm up in the mountains. Yeah. One of those things that brings me joy. And when I start editing, I'm like, okay, I did it a little bit of justice, and that's the best I can do right now. But it is definitely a very zen, very meditative moment for me.
A former guest of ours, Madison Thorne, made a very special work called High Risk Humans, about those who needed to shield during the initial peaks of COVID. So that's where we met Madison. But you know her as well, and she's been helping you on this photographic journey. You said she suggested cameras to you. What else has she been mentoring you, looking at your work, advising, giving you critique?
All of the above.
Right.
She is a saint for putting up with me. Where I'll just be editing along, and as I'm editing, I'm sending her pictures. Like, what do you think of this? And she's like, oh, you need to crop in a little bit here. If you throw a little more contrast on this or something like that. She's been one of the more encouraging people. And I have a lot of encouraging people in my life, but she is definitely high on that list when it comes to photography.
Yeah, I do think if you can reach out and find a mentor, it can be such a healthy and precious creative relationship, and I'm pleased that Madison is that for you. So I want to come to a close in this chapter of your story with the fact that 2 years after moving to Colorado, finding photography once more, dealing with COVID, and now on a recovery path for your PTSD and receiving treatment, you found a new job, and it's serendipity in full view, full action, because you're working in a store that sells feed for dogs, which is perfect, because you're sharing the pictures you make in particular of your amazing dog, Ghost, which you can find on the show page today, with customers, and it could just be leading to a new career. I think. I mean, you've got a captive audience in many ways, haven't you?
Yeah. So I'm always talking dogs, especially with selling dog food, and people want to see pictures of them whenever I describe them. So I always point them towards his Instagram account to give them an idea of what he looks like and his size. And they are happy to see those pictures, and sometimes want pictures of me to take pictures of their dogs with them. So accidentally, I kind of started a dog photography side business where people are paying me to take pictures of their dogs nowadays.
Wonderful. Wonderful. What are your plans now for your health, your mental health and photography as you move forward?
For me, one of the more important things is sticking to therapy, making sure that I'm staying on that road where to improvement. As long as I'm always improving, I'm fine. And photography, I'm going to keep taking pictures as much as I can and see where it can lead me. If it's dog photography, if it's product photography, if it's just me doing it for fun, I'm happy to just keep clicking away.
Adam Hansen. And Adam's pictures will be on the show page today. Some landscapes, his dog Ghost, of course, as you would expect, and also the protest pictures that he references. And for links to all the photographers that you've heard from or about today, Instagrams and websites that we've mentioned, go to today's show page for today's edition on photographydaily.show, or of course you can follow the link in the podcast player app that will also take you there. I'll tell you what's on the More edition tomorrow in just a moment, but we need to play out song, don't we, to make some final frames by as we complete our photo walk together. And we featured this song a while back, but it just, I don't know, I revisited it. And I thought it fits with the mood and the pace of today's show, and it's one of my absolute favourite artists. Are you going to say Anthony Lazzaro, Neil? Oh, how did you guess? Yes, I am. And this is a song I absolutely cherish. It's called All the Stars. But of course, we need a postscript to go with the song, don't we? And it really needs a mindful air. I found Pema Chodron, who's a Buddhist nun and author who's written several popular books about mindfulness. She's also the director of the only Tibetan monastery for Westerners. So I was wondering, there are so many things I could share that she has said, and I was thinking, what do I choose from all her teachings? And I've gone for this. You are the sky. Everything else is just the weather. Here's Anthony Lazzaro.
When the silver of these winter nights is shining in drops of ice, and I crawl into my bed, and the clouds won't help me, but at least we keep the voice down. Those voices inside my head, watching the sky, all the stars we'll never see, and I will carry with me. Those kisses will never break. When the nights will be haunted by the clanging of the cost of us, and our worlds are sad and down, and the miles will taunt us with our dreams just turned to dust. But you can't tell where it began. Now kisses will never bleed. The moon in the sky, all the stars will never see, and I will keep with me all those kisses.
All the Stars from Anthony Lazzaro. And that's it for this week. My thanks to those heard on the show today: Chris O'Sullivan, Rob Wiskin, Andy Fisher, Adam Hansen, Finn Beals and Ian McDonald, plus Groom, Michael, mpb.com, and those who are patrons, which you can join through the link on the website photographydaily.show. And for those wonderful supporters who are, tomorrow is The More Show. And we're talking about making better pictures with a smartphone, with a designer who's written a book about it, Mike Coos.
To me, it's like a really dramatic, you know how like lenses have a huge impact on your camera? Angles sort of have the same impact. All you have to do is take your phone from head height down to a couple of inches above the ground and it dramatically changes the frame, completely changes the world view. And even if you hold it above your head, it does, even if it's only like 8 feet off the ground, if your arm's stretched in the air, you know, that changes things a lot too.
Mike Coos on More tomorrow. Now, Monday's assignment is going to be with Jim Solos, and here is a clue to what that assignment covers.
Focusing on the timing of what I was seeing in front of me and timing my shutter finger. I got it in one shot.
What, Neil? Is that your clue? Remind me never to enter one of your escape rooms. And then next week on the Photowalk, I talk with Alex Dawson, Swedish-based cave and wreck diver with a camera, nerves of absolute steel. We are going on a proper subsurface adventure. Music today is from the wonderful artlist.io. If you have a chance to share your experience, if you enjoy the show, that helps build our community and secure our future as a podcast. Tweet it, Facebook it, shout it from the Giralda in Seville. Now, that would impress me. My thanks to Andrea Gilpin, Neil Ford and Emily Renier for backstage support, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time. Call me daft, but I'm just retracing my steps as I walk back from my photo walk. I'm looking out for this was the place where the snail was. Where are you, snail?
I'm over here.
Oh, where's that?
Here.
Oh, well, I can't see you. That means you're safe. Mind you be careful now. You're going through that wiring. You never guess who owns that.
Don't tell me. Get off my land.
Yes. Why do you sound like Car, by the way? Is it you, Car? Hiding in the undergrowth?
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.